This will absolutely shock you. There's unsettling similarities between Satan and aliens, guys, and this lady talks about it, and it's absolutely fascinating. And this is something that we all been talking about for the longest time. Aliens are demonic. They're spiritual beings. And I think this just points to what the Bible has been talking about all along. So let's get into it. Shout out to the Janny Jones podcast.
Library, which is really amazing, and he had a lot of historical things from the history of ufology in the United States and things from European Catholic history, like looked like extant copies of books about angels and things like that. So it was amazing, and things that belonged to Allen Hynek and things like that.
And you were shocked, I think, to see all of the books that he had on angels that were in his library.
I was.
Would you ask him about that? What did he say about that?
So in the library, he showed me a lot of books about, like I said, the history of ufology, like, historical stuff from Project Blue Book. And
right. That's the kind of stuff that I would expect to see in Jacques Vallée's library.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And so, but most of the library was dedicated to these very old books of angels. And so he took out a couple and he showed them to me. And he had a whole row of angels and a whole row of like fallen angels type thing. And he made some jokes about it, well, if you have one, you have to have the other kind of thing.
And he gave you a book at the end of your meeting with him that day. What was this book?
Okay, so
this book on the devil, right?
Well, it was a history of Satan.
Okay.
And it was done by these Carmelite nuns. And so he gave me the book and he said, you should try to acquire this book. It's really good. And I looked at it, and then the paging on it was really interesting. It was the last page was 666. So he laughed and said they had a sense of humor, you know? And so, yeah, that was, at the time I was really shocked by that. And thought it was, what? So it took me a while to actually talk to him about it, because I thought, how do you ask somebody about this, right? So I did ask him, and he said that, and he's right. So the way we see, he was basically suggesting it because of the ways in which, how the ways in which the UFO are made to look kind of a certain way, but when you look into it, they look different. And the same way with religious traditions, like Teresa of Avila's experience with the little angel. If you look at pictures and paintings from that and the statue of that, it looks very different than the primary source material.
Yep.
Okay, like the description that she actually gave when she wrote it.
Yeah, it looks completely different.
Or like the description of angels in the Bible compared to how many paintings of angels we see. Because you see just a person with wings, instantly you're like, angel. But if you actually draw a description of what the Bible talks about, then it's different. But I'm interested to see what she's getting at here, because at the end of the day, I think if you really go down the rabbit hole of aliens and really try to understand what exactly aliens are, you're gonna realize that there's some spiritual beings still created by God, not from this distant galaxy. Who knows? Maybe they are. Because they can travel. But probably spiritual from another realm. Completely different.
Then what do you call it? Telephone game. Right? Yeah, so there's telephone game in texts too. Mm-hmm. Right? Okay. And in representations of spiritual experiences. So basically he was saying that if you look at the history of this person, with this being, that it's going to look completely different. And the people that did the best biography are these Carmelite nuns who had access to all of the primary source material.
Did you read the book?
So I did look for the book, and I didn't do a hard search for it because I was so busy.
Right.
I haven't been able to, but I do want to acquire the book, absolutely. So no, I have not read it. But his work is basically to look at these texts, just like my work is, to look at the primary sources and to create his own understanding of it instead of looking at what people say about these primary sources. So that's the work he was trying to do with that book and why he gave it to me. I think he also gave it to me because I'm not sure. He's funny. He's got a good sense of humor. He may have been trying to kind of shock me. I don't know. But it was pretty funny at the time.
So I'm sure you've done a lot of, I'm just interested in this because I'm interested in the devil personally.
Okay.
And one of the famous quotes, I wrote it down here. One of the old sayings that I love is, the devil has always been the church's best friend because he kept him in business. You've heard that, I'm sure.
Yes.
That's so messed up, Danny. I wonder in what way, like anytime you're interested in the devil is a tricky business. And the most ironic thing is that a lot of people who say they're satanic, they're atheists actually. But also it's like, it makes sense because at the end of the day, the devil doesn't want you to believe in him, and he doesn't obviously want you to believe in God, because if you believe in the devil, you're probably going to believe in God. That's why most people who experience some crazy evil things, supernatural evil things, they realize, yeah, if there's evil, there must be good. And if there's good, there must be a God. Crazy.
I had a guy on here recently who was teaching me all about the devil. He did a little documentary on the history of Lucifer. And he basically said that Lucifer was never real.
Well, I mean, that's like saying God has never been real, right? So we can't actually prove the existence of the beings that people believe in, okay? There's no microscope, okay, this being exists. Right. Which is kind of an interesting critique of religion, because there's a lot of things we can't actually prove the existence of. Like when we tried to prove the existence of atoms, you know, they kind of go around, electrons move in different directions. And, you know, so scientists even have a hard time proving what they believe to be like real kinds of things. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So as a person who studies religion, when you start to look at the ways in which either Satan, and there is a named Satan in the Bible, which is the Hebrew Bible, Christian Old Testament, and New Testament, right? So, and Lucifer. So you look at these, you see that the Bible's created, it's basically a bunch of different books put together, mm-hmm. and they're written by different people over many, many years, hundreds of years.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So the depictions of like the Satan in the book of Job, for example, looks to be like, you know, he's kind of like a friend of God, right? Mm-hmm. So if you look at that depiction of Satan, and then you look at the depiction of Satan in other texts in the Bible, they look to be terrible or something completely different.
So here's a fascinating tidbit from watching Michael Heiser. He says that the description of the word for like Satan is totally different than any other like Satan or Lucifer type character or the devil, because it doesn't even really say that it is Satan there. It is the accuser. He goes roaming around finding fault in people. That was like the description of that spiritual being in the Old Testament. So he's the accuser. Of course, that's what he's doing. He roams around looking for fault in people. He's the accuser. He's, of course, going to be talking about Job because he doesn't find like anything, you know, going on with Job. And he tried to test God essentially by saying he only worships you because he hasn't had anything bad happen to him. And God's like, whoa, sure about that, buddy? You sure about that? But yeah, Heiser is not even completely convinced that that's the same, you know, Satan that everyone likes to think about, because it's just a different explanation, different word for that character. Because it more means the accuser.
Than that. So it doesn't look like there's like a cohesive person or entity that's Satan. Now, well, let's just take Christianity. That's what I'm most informed in. Mm-hmm. You'll see that there are other texts that talk about this being. And, you know, and then you have people that have experiences of this being or of evil, and they call it Satan. So I haven't listened to that podcast that you did with that person, mm-hmm. but in terms of the unreality of it, I would say that if you're looking at a cohesive person or a cohesive entity called Satan. It's not cohesive within the Bible. You're not going to see that. But if you look at it within the various traditions that discuss this person or assume it, and, in various denominations of Christianity, Satan exists or doesn't exist. So, there are some denominations that don't talk about Satan.
Well, that doesn't mean that they don't believe he exists. I mean, yeah, that is a problem to believe like there's no spirituality, there's no demonic forces out there. But also, if someone experiences some spiritual being that's like a demon, they could still be thinking, oh, that's obviously the devil, that's Satan. How would they know? But obviously, there's descriptions of different spiritual beings that are not following God. There's the fallen angels. There's the sons of God who rebelled against God. They're different. That doesn't mean that there's not a specific individual like a Lucifer who was the leader and rebelled against God.
Been certain factions of one denomination that will talk about Satan or not talk about Satan. So, yeah, that would be my answer.
I think James Fox's creature in Virginia could have been Satan.
Yeah. So exactly. That's my point, is that you have descriptions of weird things like that, and then people ascribe it to Satan. They say this must be Satan, or this must be a demon, or something like that. And you still have that within Catholic cultures. If you have a UFO sighting and there happens to be the smell of sulfur and these beings that look like this, they're going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Maybe though it's because they are demonic. They are demons. There are things that we just don't understand, but also it's pretty obvious that they're coming from a different realm, not from some far, far away galaxy. So I would love to know what you guys think. This is also fascinating. This is also crazy. And should we be talking more about the spiritual realm and being more aware of it? Because Paul says we do not fight against flesh and blood, but against the principalities and the rulers and the authorities in the unseen realm. So guys, so interesting stuff. Shout out to Danny Jones for that podcast. Super interesting. And yeah, subscribe if you haven't. I am trying to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I know we can do it with your help. So thank you so much for all the love and support. It means the world. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. Have an amazing day, and God bless.